Hello there, Commonwealth from here. Despite sitting lower on Metacritic than Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom absolutely destroys any competition this year, but also in this generation. So be sure to leave a like, subscribe and press the notification bell, as this is history in the making. Nintendo's sales result up to the end of June 2023 shows that The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom alone carries the Switch to surpass expectations. After delivering the strongest launch ever in the first 3 days, over 10 million, the 20th Zelda has officially sold over 18.5 million copies by the end of June. That is right, after a little over 1.5 months on the market, Tears of the Kingdom was already past the halfway point to catch up to Breath of the Wild's 30+ million copies sold on Nintendo Switch to date. In fact, Tears of the Kingdom is the main contributor to Nintendo Switch sales in the first half of the year, to a degree that close to 7 million more Switch systems were sold since the end of March, meaning that by all indications, Tears of the Kingdom has caused Nintendo Switch total sales since 2017 to surpass 130 million units sold by the upload of this video, meaning that only 25 million systems remain to surpass the DS total units for a new Nintendo system record. A feat that likely would not have been reached if it wasn't for the golden Tears of the Kingdom OLED system. Something that even Nintendo pointed out in their quarterly report. Quote, global hardware sell-through in the first quarter increased compared to the same quarter last fiscal year, helped by sales of Nintendo Switch OLED model, including Nintendo Switch OLED model The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom Edition, which was launched at the end of April. Naturally, sales of the game are not as quick as they were at launch, which included pre-orders, but even with a slowing sales pace, we can already conclude the following. The latest Zelda is already among the 10 best-selling Nintendo Switch games of all time. In fact, it is officially at 9th place after 46 days on the market, meaning that you now need over 16 million copies sold to even be in the top 10. Nevertheless, it is likely higher than that as of the beginning of August, since 8th placed, the best-selling Mario Party in Nintendo's history, sits at 19.39 million sold copies, which means that Tears of the Kingdom has in the summer vacation rush probably surpassed this number. Heck, it might even have surpassed 20 million copies sold as of the upload of this video, only 10 million behind Breath of the Wild's lifetime sales on the Switch. In fact, if 20+ million copies has been surpassed, then Tears of the Kingdom might have already surpassed or be very close to one of the 2 Pokémon Door releases at 7th and 6th spot on Nintendo's official top 10 list. Since Pokémon Scarlet and Violet sits at 22.6 million copies at the end of June, but looking at the sales pace of Tears of the Kingdom, it might be close to it or already surpassed it. Pokémon Sword and Shield with 26 million is most likely still above Tears, but will not likely remain so by the end of the year. The same can be said about 5th place Super Mario Odyssey at 26.4 million copies sold. Points to that 3D Zelda has solidified its position for good as bigger than 3D Mario. Breath of the Wild was not the exception, but rather the setter of a new norm. Speaking of the 2017 game changer and GOTY, Tears of the Kingdom could in less than 7 months surpass Breath of the Wild's total near 7-year-long sales. It is a tall order to reach over the next 4 months, but it is actually possible. Why am I saying this? As Tears of the Kingdom is achieving something that Breath of the Wild wasn't able to, bring in even more players, including from Nintendo's own home market. To put this into perspective, let's go over the numbers. Total Breath of the Wild sales in Japan are still under 3 million copies. Well, Tears of the Kingdom had already by the end of June sold 3.26 million copies in Japan. That is right, Tears of the Kingdom has surpassed Breath of the Wild's total sales over 6 years in less than 40 days in Japan, the best-selling Zelda game of all time in the land of the rising sun, and in what might be an unbeatable time, unless this is the turning point where 3D Mario is about to abdicate its 3D throne to Zelda in the market where Zelda has been considered as a Western franchise. I have no idea how this was not highlighted more specifically in the report, as this is literally gaming history in the making. But Nintendo's lifesaver in the first half of 2023 isn't only a sales game changer in Japan, but also in all Western markets. Something that Nintendo pointed out with the following quote, which puts the impact of Tears of the Kingdom into better perspective. Quote, Sell-through of Tears of the Kingdom constitutes approximately half of the first-party software sold this fiscal year. That is to say, since March 31st. Consumers who played the previous entry, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, has been the primary driver, but as the weeks have passed, we have seen that a growing percentage of purchases are being made by consumers who have not yet played that title. End quote. That growing percentage is in a big part Japanese gamers who never play Breath of the Wild, and they have contributed that over 21% of total Tears of the Kingdom copies by the end of June were sold in Japan. 3.23 million copies. This number might not look impressive at first, until you realize that total Breath of the Wild sales in Japan don't even constitute 10% of the total sold copies worldwide of that game. Let that sink in. The Zelda team has done the impossible, hand in hand with the Nintendo Switch. It has doubled the market share that Japanese Zelda players have compared to the West. For the first time, Zelda's a giant in Japan. Clearly, the marketing for Tears of the Kingdom and collaboration with Lawson worked, and now the franchise has a brighter future than ever. By doing so, it absolutely destroyed the sales potential of Final Fantasy XVI on the PlayStation 5, a game that is seen as Nintendo's main Japanese rival for Game of the Year this year. Being able to play a game like this undocked has simply changed what games Japan plays, and despite constituting 24% of all players worldwide, Final Fantasy XVI is not even close to 1.5 million sales in Japan yet. In fact, it is only 1.2 million by most optimistic measurements, meaning that Tears of the Kingdom has sold more than double that of Final Fantasy XVI in Japan. This is absolutely unheard of. In fact, it is more than that, since Final Fantasy XVI has only sold 37% of what Tears of the Kingdom has sold in Japan. And if a less optimistic measurement is applied, then Tears of the Kingdom might have sold 3 times more than Final Fantasy XVI in Japan. Time to learn Japanese, fellow Zelda tubers. Jokes aside, this is absolutely mind-blowing and just shows how absolutely complete Nintendo's home market dominance has become. But what most likely matters to the leadership in Kyoto is that Zelda no longer is grouped with Metroid as a Western Nintendo franchise. Now it is also a Japanese one. Something that must be the news that matters the most for the Zelda team. Why? As up to this point, despite massive international success, the Zelda team had not received the same recognition, or more specifically popularity at home, as in the West, even when they are the only Nintendo franchise in modern times to have won the Game of the Year award at the Game Awards. And destroying Final Fantasy so utterly is something that has never happened before in Japan. 3D Mario and Final Fantasy have been destroyed both in Japan and worldwide when it comes to sales in one generation. Now that is something the Zelda team could never imagined after Skyward Sword sold less than 4 million copies worldwide on the Wii. Going open air was the best move the franchise could have made. Yes, there are still things that can be done better in future titles, but even then, it just shows that this franchise's potential is near endless. Naturally, all of these are numbers, but what the Zelda team and Nintendo has shown is that despite 37 years of history, by making changes and providing the right marketing, you can turn a franchise with critical acclaim into one of the best-selling games on the market. I do now believe that by the time we reach the end of the Nintendo Switch lifecycle, in holiday 2024 or later, Tears of the Kingdom will surpass Breath of the Wild and might even do it by the end of the year. But what is more important is that after 1.5 years on the market, it might even claim the 3rd place, currently held by Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, at close to 32 million copies sold. Animal Crossing New Horizon at close to 43 million copies, and definitely Mario Kart 8 Deluxe at over 55 million copies are likely not reachable. But even then, we can conclude the following. Tears of the Kingdom is on the path to become the 2nd best-selling brand new Nintendo title this generation, only beaten by Animal Crossing New Horizons, which had a 3-year full pandemic year's head start, while Tears of the Kingdom launched 1.5 years prior to the rumored release of Nintendo Switch successor. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, despite still being the only Switch title to sell more than 1 million copies over the first 3 months of the new fiscal year, had the entire Switch generation to build its sales basis. Though if we apply the Deluxe name to Tears of the Kingdom for a release with or near the launch of Nintendo's next system, then who knows if 55+ million copies can be reached. A nearly impossible order for sure. but one that could be achieved seeing that we're probably 5 to 6 years from the next open-air 3D Zelda title. That is a lot of time for Tears of the Kingdom to reach 50 million sold copies across 2 systems over 6 years. And I think we'll leave it at that, since the impact of the 20th Zelda is far bigger than anyone could have possibly imagined. Definitely defying all the sales rules of a Nintendo 3D sequel, and definitely a Zelda sequel. But what do you think? Will Tears of the Kingdom destroy the competition not only with review scores, but also sales, even compared to Bethesda's Starfield? Sound off in the comment section down below. If you haven't already, then be sure to leave a like, subscribe and press the notification bell to not miss any of our many and varied Tears of the Kingdom videos. Last but not least, a big thanks to all of you who watch until the end, and to all our patreon.com/comearound patrons. You rock, and please enjoy one or both of these 2 awesome videos.